How is everybody doing? And welcome back for another Strength Chat episode. Today, I've got a very special guest for you all. Today, I'm joined by an S&C coach who, for the last 10 or more years, has worked with the New Zealand All Blacks. Today, I am joined by the one and only Nic Gill. How are you doing?
Good, thanks, Steve. Thanks for having me, mate. Looking forward to this chat.
No worries at all. Thanks a lot for taking the time to jump on. How are you? What's been happening in your world recently?
How am I? I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for asking. I'm busy at the moment. We're in the middle of All Black season, but we're at home at the moment, having a little break before we head up your ways in a couple of weeks. So yeah, the players are scattered around the country, around the world. Actually, everyone taking a bit of a breather after a pretty tough sort of campaign over this side of the world with South Africa and Australia and Argentina, where and obviously coming off the series loss to Ireland. So she's been a tough old year, but we're looking forward to get on the plane and rip into it again soon.
Oh, cool. I should have waited a couple of weeks and waited until we were on similar time zones.
It might have been a bit easier to try and connect, mate, rather than be all over the shop. No, she's all good, mate. She's all good.
Oh, cool. Now, obviously, I gave a very brief introduction there. Obviously, working with the All Blacks. But for anyone listening who might not know your background in obviously coaching, but also the education side of things and research side of things, just want to give a little bit of a background to yourself.
Okay, I completed my PhD in 2001, and my PhD was in exercise physiology and strength and power sort of adaptations. And then I've been an S&C coach in rugby since then. So 20 odd years, been with the All Blacks. I think this is my 16th year with the All Blacks. So it's been a full-time gig with them for a wee while. And in between sort of seasons, I'm an associate professor in human performance and supervise a lot of research students, PhD students, and all sorts of, I suppose, all sorts of investigations to try and enhance what we know about certain aspects of performance. So I sort of am an avocado orchard man. I grow avocados, and yeah, that's sort of me. I'm sort of pretty busy, lots on my plate, but love it.
Plenty of things to keep you out of trouble. Then that's what I like to hear. With that, because obviously, especially working working with the All Blacks, at the elite level, but then also building up to that and the work that you've done before. I always kind of like to ask who have been your influences when it comes to coaching and training, because the people that you're working with, people might look at what you're doing, but who's been your influences?
Yeah, it's I don't know what is with that question. Everyone seems to ask that question nowadays. Mentors and who do you look up to and all that. I think it's a tough one to answer because when you're trying to lead and you're trying to be the best you can be. I suppose you never stop learning. You don't look for one source of, I suppose, knowledge or skill set to try and mimic. I'm just constantly trying to figure out how I can be better at what I do, and whether that's reading, whether that's conversations with people, in all sorts of areas, whether that's psychology, whether that's nutrition, whether that's strength and conditioning, recovery, physiotherapy, whatever it is. I don't think we ever stop knowing everything. We ever know everything, and we need to keep learning. So I'm sort of learning every day, even from the athletes that I work with. Some of the guys I've worked with for 12, 13 years, and we, whilst we don't necessarily change heaps, we keep trying to, I suppose, probe and help each other be better. So I think it's just a non-stop treadmill of learning, really. And I'm always looking at other sports. I'm always looking at other programs, even businesses, on how businesses or other teams build culture, and and I suppose buy into programs, etc., etc. But yeah, no one source, because I've been doing this for 20 odd years, so I sort of go through sort of fits and starts. I mean, there's a few people that I have a lot of respect for, that I love catching up with. Probably socially more than sort of work wise. But Kelly Starrett up in America, him and I get on like a house on fire. And there's a few people up in the UK that I love having a cold ale with. So I think it's just you form relationships with people and you shoot the shit. And I love what I do. So when you find other people love what they do, it's sort of, I don't think it's about mentorship or anything like that, but just sharing.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with sharing, and because if you share, others share, and then you keep learning, keep getting better.
Yeah, definitely. And that's, the one thing that you said there is just enjoying just enjoying catching up with people. And if you love what you do, you're going to chat. And, that's why I stuck with the name Strength Chat, because just having a conversation, other things will start coming out and people can, learn from it. Because, I think sometimes people can gravitate towards one method and then not think that, oh well, I might try this, or how can I learn from this, because that's obviously how we get better and how we develop with that. Because obviously working with a team, I know that team obviously changes over 10 plus years. In terms of starting with the the elite level athletes that are coming in, how has kind of maybe your approach changed to the camps that they're in? Has it changed, or has it just been a case of just trying to have that repeatable success, if that makes sense?
Oh no, things change all the time. We're coming together next week for a camp, and if I think about the camp we had at the start of the year to the camp we had the middle of the year to this camp, there's definite changes because the needs of the group change. So I think that's something that people need to be aware of, is that the needs of individuals and the needs of a group change daily, weekly, monthly, yearly. So we don't roll out the same shit every camp. Everything changes. The focus changes. So we could have a focus on skill development this camp, or it could be a physical loading camp. So it's a matter of figuring out with the staff, with the coaching group, what are the priorities, and then we plan the details around what's most important. And I think that applies to any session, or any week, or even a test week, is identify the priorities. And once you understand the priorities, and it's really, really easy to implement a plan and nail them. I think people fall into a trap, and I certainly did when I was younger, of having lots and lots of priorities. There's so many things that are important, and you end up trying to do everything, and you end up doing nothing well. So I think identifying the priorities is sort of what we do, and so things change all the time.
Yeah. And with that, because when you said there, at the start, maybe having too many priorities, how much is that, or how much of an influence do you have when the players go back to their clubs, in terms of having them to work on something, or is that sort of completely separate, and the S&C that they're doing at their club, it's just when they come into the national setup, that's the focus that they're on?
Oh, I think the key thing is that whatever is important, the player believes is important as well. Okay, and if the player believes that they have three priorities that are really important to them becoming a better rugby player, then it's irrelevant what environment they're in, whether they're in the All Blacks, the Super Rugby team, or an NPC team. It should be irrelevant. If the player buys into that being a priority, then they'll be the one that should be driving that focus. So it's not a matter of, in the All Blacks you do this, and in the club they want you to do this. You try to avoid that conflict. I mean, there shouldn't be a conflict, because at the end of the day, it's about, rugby's not complicated. It's about nailing the big rocks in your role in the team, and so really, if the priority is correct and the player buys into that, then there's no issue. It should be an ongoing development pathway.
Yeah, and that I think that's the big thing that we talk about, exercises and those sorts of things, and I'm sure we'll touch on programming, but I think that is getting the buy-in from from the athletes as well, and with that, because obviously the athletes are going to be in short periods of time when it comes to the international window, and sometimes there can be that thought of, oh wow, I bet that's like really high intensity and it's like another level up rather than a long season. How do in terms of the priorities of that, is there sometimes where you'll push it a little bit, sometimes when you'll draw back a little bit? Is that dependent on the games or the training volume, or from the coaches down? How do you sort of manage that in a short space of time?
Um, yeah, well, it's not really easy to do because you've got if we got 35 players in our squad coming up that's been announced in a couple of days, and each of those players has got different sort of backgrounds in the last 12 months. So um, their loading and what they need based on their individual experiences the last wee while, so you not only got the current, let's say their past couple of months to consider, but you've also got to consider their age, their injury history, um, all those things as to what a player needs. So it's actually not as simple as the team's going to have this loading. There's individuals within the team that need different stuff. So that's an ongoing sort of process of us trying to figure out who needs what and how we're going to achieve that without compromising the team's I suppose needs in terms of their preparation. So it's just ongoing, Steve. Like you can't just roll out a prescription to the group. It's trying to figure out, well, who can do what. I mean, I just sat down this morning and went through everyone's plans for tomorrow and made some tweaks, and not everyone's doing the same thing because not everyone needs the same thing. So that's just programming, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. You kind of hit the nail on the head, and I was glad I was along the right lines from that, because even though when we're looking at team sports and there's things that people need to be focusing on, they're still individuals. You've mentioned there, the age, the experience, previous injuries, how they've been over the last 12 months is important to take into account. I think with that as well, which is something that maybe a little bit of a tangent, but how do you manage sort of the travel as well? I know Australia isn't too far away, but when you look at going to like South Africa, Argentina, especially now that's opened up, did you find that that was something that you needed to take into account a little bit more, the travel? Because for maybe 3 years, obviously that travel wasn't as much. Did that have an impact on recovery or performance?
Oh, it's tough, mate. Like it's we've done that. Well, I've done that trip lots of times, so it wasn't anything new just because we had COVID interrupt it. But like the time in a plane and the jet lag and the time shifts and all that, it's just one of those things that you take into consideration. So it just means the loading for that week you're considering one other element, which is jet lag and fatigue. So we alter our schedule and our exposure based on what we think is appropriate for the group with the travel that we've done. We're coming up north in a couple of weeks, so we go to Japan, then we head up to Wales, and a couple of big flights and a couple of time shifts over those 2 weeks, and it's just part and parcel of professional sport. I don't think you need to make a big fuss of it. It's just another scheduling thing to sort of throw into the melting pot to understand what you're going to do on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
Yeah.
So in short, yes, you have to consider it and structure your sessions around it.
Yeah. Do you think sometimes as well, because from there, it is one of those things, traveling is going to be part and parcel of professional sport. Do you think sometimes that can be overanalyzed and, trying to control all the variables rather than, being not more relaxed, but thinking like, look, we're gonna have to deal with this. We're gonna have to, adjust or, try and work within that plan of that.
Oh, totally. People make a mountain out of a molehill, right? Like it's just you're just tired. You're just tired, and you're in a different time zone. Get on with it. I think people make a big fuss about lots of things, and if you think it's a big deal, it will become a big deal for the athlete because you're telling them it's an issue. So I think the psychology of it all is important to think about, and that it's like playing at altitude. If you tell an athlete that the altitude's going to make their performance tougher and they're not going to go as well, you're basically telling them they're not going to go very well. Okay. Whereas if you just get on with it, and it's just one of those things you got to deal with. It's just one of those things. Get on with it. So yeah, I agree, Steve. You sort of just got to realise that there's lots of things in it out in the competitive arena. There's lots of things you can't control. It's how you let it affect you in terms of your physical and psychological performance. That's important.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing I want to touch on from there, which kind of builds on from that, obviously within the realms of sports science and power output and all those those sorts of things, does that kind of play that similar role as well? Like, how much do you rely on the numbers? Because it's that balance of we do need to get on with it. There's the things that we need to do, but then also there's numbers there to balance it out as well. What kind of is that balance when you're working with athletes at the elite level?
I think numbers are incredibly powerful, and incredibly useful, but sometimes I think it's really easy to get sort of I suppose swallowed up by the data, and I think that the data is just one piece of the puzzle that you need to be thinking about. So I think you got to be looking at the athlete, watching them on all the time, how they're moving, what their body language is like. How do their eyes look? Do they look like they're sort of full of energy, or are they as a sort of wallowing around in fatigue? You look at the numbers, and then you have to sort of forecast forward as to, okay, so this is what I'm seeing, this is what the data's showing. Okay, so then what do I need to do, or what do we need to do going forward? So I think if you're just looking at data, you can actually miss a lot. So yeah, the data is part of the decision-making process to help, I suppose, help people have richer conversations. Like really, that's what it's about. Even for me with athletes, like data helps me have better quality discussions or conversations with the athlete, rather than this is what I'm thinking, this is what my gut feel is. What's your feel, in terms of the athlete, and then us trying to figure something out. But if we've got some data to actually anchor some conversation points on, it just helps things a little bit. But yeah, we can get sort of swallowed up by it because there's so much available nowadays.
Yeah, and from the kind of switching that to the athletes that you've worked with, we've said that from like a coaching point of view, especially now when you're watching on BT Sport or Sky or anything like that, there seems to be loads and loads of stats of this is how fast they've been clocked running and all those sorts of things. Do you think sometimes that can maybe, well, is there pros and cons to that with the athletes? Because even though they're rugby players, they're athletes in terms of jump performance and strength. Do you think sometimes they can be caught up in that of trying to hit numbers, or a little bit like what you mentioned earlier, like ultimately they're rugby players and it's the performance of the team rather than chasing those numbers as an athlete? Have you ever experienced that, or doesn't that really happen at the elite level?
Oh no, absolutely. Some players will think that the further they run in a training, the better they've trained, and it's a load of bollocks. Because they could have run the furthest in the whole team, but they could have dropped 6 passes and been in the wrong place every single time there was a set move. So I think that's where numbers are a waste of time. And so some numbers, some data points are really important for the athlete, and some aren't. And that's why, like for me at least, there's an element of information that we don't necessarily need athletes to be aware of. They're just for us to have richer conversations. And likewise, there's some data we'd love the athletes to see, if we're setting some targets or setting some metrics that we think are important for them to hit. And I think the key thing is education around the data. So athletes need to understand what's a number they should be worried about, and what's a number that they don't need to even think about. And I'd rather athletes worried about their body composition and their strength and their power and their speed than their workload. Like, that's my job, worry about their workload. They just need to worry about how quick they can run, or how fast they can jump, or how high they can jump. So a lot of it's education, which is really what coaching's about.
Yeah, definitely. Because I think sometimes there can be that thought process of, they don't. It's just do X, Y, and Z. Whereas actually, the athlete, and we touched on it a little bit earlier in terms of getting that buy-in, what's going to be best for the team and improving their performance. They have that education surrounding that, not just doing it for the sake of doing it. That kind of goes onto the programming side of things, because especially when you're with athletes for a short period of time, there's lots of things that you've got to think about. Oh, well, we could do this, we could do that. And going back to what we mentioned about the start, in terms of the priorities, what is that sort of overcomplicating things, but then being really effective in what happens? Do you think sometimes that, as you've been with the All Blacks, that exercise selection has become more effective and it's narrowed down, rather than trying to overcomplicate the programming, if that kind of makes sense?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what I said earlier. Like, it's about the individual, right? So it's not about coming up with new cool exercises to do, or new ways of training. How people get strong hasn't changed forever in a day, right? So it's not rocket science. People do overcomplicate everything, in my opinion. End of the day, the athletes need to move well, with good weight, and whether that be slow and heavy, or moderate and fast, or light and quick, whatever the focus is for that individual. And then it's about what exercises are going to give you the best bang for your buck. And so for example, if an athlete has a lumbar back issue, which I have a couple of athletes like that, then hey, we don't squat. We do heavy single leg work, or we do some elevated deadlifts, and so you're trying to figure out, well, here's the individual, this is what the history says, this is what we know is really good for them, or what's not good for them. Not about, okay, what's going to be the coolest, best program for them. Because at the end of the day, the best program, again, this is just my opinion, the best program is the one the athlete believes in is going to help them be a better athlete, right? And so you and I, Steve, could both write a program, and on paper they would both look amazing, I'm sure, right? And we'd have arguments for 2 or 3 days about which program's the best, right? The best one will be the one the athlete does to the best of their ability consistently over time, okay? Because that's where the results will come. It's about how the program's executed, not about what's on paper. And so that's the missing piece of the puzzle for most people. Is you can spend hours and hours and hours behind the laptop putting this amazing program together, but if the athlete thinks it's a load of bollocks and isn't going to help them on Saturday, then they'll do other shit, or they'll do other stuff that isn't actually part of the program, and you'll end up with maybe not a good outcome. So I think it's really not about the exercise selection or the changes, but it's actually, how do I get this athlete to understand this is what's important and why it's important, and that it's going to help them. And I also have to consider their experience in their own body. Okay, they're living in their body; they know it better than I do. And so you've got to sort of connect with that person to say, well, what works for you, what doesn't. And I think that's my biggest learning over my 20 years in S&C is I used to just write programs and tell them to do it. Yeah. Now I'll discuss the needs, and I'll come up with a program based on our conversations.
Yeah. Do you think from that as well, it's kind of, especially when, coming in for internationals, it's the mindset thing of maybe how, you've said there from experience, how they've been at clubs, or how they've been bought into other programs before, sort of those soft skills of coaching in terms of, seeing, right, okay, so how can we work together as a team, rather than just like what you mentioned there, right? I'm just going to write programs up and go from there. It's more of a mindset side of thing from a coach.
Yeah, absolutely. Collaboration. It's you like I said earlier, you're a teacher as well as much as anything, and so you're trying to figure out what the because performance and sporting performance is also a big part of that's confidence, right? And so you need to build trust in the athlete's confidence, one in what they've been doing or are going to do to get them ready for their game, right? And so if they've been doing certain things, even if I don't necessarily agree with them, if they've been doing certain things and they're playing really well, then it's a matter of me and the athlete trying to figure out, well, hey, that's really good. Could we tweak this a little bit more and help you even more on Saturday? So, um, yeah, we definitely don't throw programs or historical stuff away when they come into our environment. If anything, it's okay, what's been working for you, what hasn't, what do we need to tweak or change? And that's an ongoing process, regardless of whether they're coming to the All Blacks or leaving the All Blacks. It should just be an ongoing process.
Yeah, definitely. And with that as well, just touching on the programming side of things, obviously um uh, the the power and speed that the athletes, especially when you look at the All Black squad and the All Black team, there's some great athletes in there. I know from myself, watching watching the rugby championship. With that, is it sometimes a case of maybe depending if they're new to the squad or maybe a little bit older or are looking for changes to their game? It's sometimes maybe controlling those elements because you've got those raw materials there where it's to then put them in the right right areas so they can use it more effectively. What's kind of your thoughts on controlling that strength or power or that speed, if that kind of makes sense?
So what do you mean? Like, how do I control their focus, or how do I control
Yeah,
how much
so
they
if
do? Or
Yeah, if if we're looking, I'm just going to use a forward as an example as I play in the forwards. Obviously, the strength there is kind of a case of we don't need to get them necessarily stronger. It's how do we use those strengths? If it's a
oh
back
yeah,
and they've got the speed, how do we then make it a change of direction or something like that? How do you kind of control those variables to put them in the right areas to benefit the team performance?
well that's just programming again, isn't it? Like we've got a couple of big boys that are plenty strong enough, but they're not quite quick enough, and so programming for them around periods of strength development and periods of power speed development is just cycles. It's just understanding again, like how strong enough, or linear speed versus lateral speed and change of direction. So again, that just fits into the puzzle for the individual. And again, I tend to not try and overcomplicate things too much, because generally speaking, by the time the athletes get to the All Blacks, um, most of them have sort of hit some pretty good levels of physical development, and so now it's a matter of keeping athletes healthy and really good physical condition to play week upon week, and survive the brutal game that we love so much of rugby union, over 10 months of the year. And so, like, it's not survival of the fittest, but it sort of is. The better shape we can hold people in, and for longer periods of time, then the healthier the group will be as the year unfolds. And so there's a matter of trying to understand, do we need to enhance the speed at which you create force or the direction you create force, but also how do we allow you to do what you do week upon week and not get hurt? And so a massive part of any program, in my opinion, should be about injury prevention, not just about bigger, faster, stronger, higher. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. And with that as well, because we've spoken a lot about sort of buy-in from athletes having the best program from that. Do you think that's maybe when it comes to, you mentioned there about, a couple of players that are strong enough, they just need to get faster. Is that sometimes the bigger challenge when they already know that they're strong and that's like their weak point, if you like, because you've got the program there, but do you find that hard to buy in, or because the professional athletes, they understand that they need to work on that.
Oh shit, no! Like, mate, like it's ongoing. Sometimes you're banging your head against a brick wall, and that's the challenge, isn't it? Like it's education, ongoing education, and trying to get alignment and agreement between you and the athlete, because um, like I just said, a couple of big boppers are strong enough, but that's why they're also in the All Blacks.
Mm.
So you've got to remember that sometimes there's physical attributes athletes have that are the reason why they're with me in the first place.
Yeah.
And so you don't want to change too much, because one, it's obviously allowed them to achieve at a great level to then be selected in this team. But also from a confidence perspective, they've probably gained a lot of confidence of feeling that strong, and therefore when they're out in the park, they can do their job and they can be fully confident they've got everything they need to do it. And so it's just subtle tweaks, isn't it? And it's understanding, hey, you're really strong, but this week we're going to pull back a little bit and move weight a bit quicker, and this is why. You happy with that? Okay, and then this week here we're going to actually reload some strength, and you can lift as heavy as bloody want.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It's been a constant theme throughout this of that constant education, and that kind of goes on to especially we've spoken about obviously athletes at the elite level, and to play for the All Blacks is the pinnacle, and we talk about standards in terms of performance, or what we expect. Is that a culture that's gonna that benefits performance, or because what like what you've touched on there is terms of making sure that they're healthy, that they can keep performing rather than striving for standards that can actually be detrimental. Is the pros and cons to that? Is that how you work, or what's kind of your approach?
Oh, totally. Like I've stopped using standards and norms years ago, because they create a line in the sand that some athletes will never ever get to. Okay, because that's just that they just don't have that physical ability, and you could push and push and push to get them to a certain level, and then you end up breaking them. So yeah, they've hit a good number, but now they can't play for 6 months. Um, and I'm definitely guilty of that back in the early days of chasing numbers, and I think that the key thing, and I feel like I'm being a bit repetitive here, but it's about understanding, well, as an individual athlete, what does their history look like? What is good for them? And let's say that they, they've only ever squatted to 200 kilos. That's the absolute best, and it was 4 years ago. And we've got a World Cup coming up, and it might be like, well, hey, it'd be really good to get back to that number, you know, rather than me just pulling a number out my ass and saying, well, I want you to hit 250. Okay, because all of a sudden now it's like, well, that's one, unrealistic. Two, you're going to increase risk of injury. And three, psychologically, the athlete's going to be like, oh, there's no, I'm going to hit that. I can't do it. I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
So I think again, it comes back to understanding the individual, the history, their strengths and weaknesses, their work ethic, what helps them play well in the weekend, what doesn't, and then you throw it all in a pot, and then everyone should have different targets. Everyone should be trying to achieve different things. And I've got a lot of athletes that I'm not trying to improve anything on.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to keep them out there. I'm just trying to keep them healthy, and stimulated and enjoying the process, versus trying to push levels of achievement and trying to get everyone better, because some people are already in great nick, and so we're just trying to keep them out in the park.
Yeah, definitely. I think something like that, maintaining and making sure that they can get out and play on a Saturday, or whenever they're playing is key for that as well. Do you think that's where sometimes if you see a team with quite a lot of injuries, or struggling, is that sometimes maybe that they are trying to push for these standards, whereas actually that culture of success and buy-in is like what you've said, basing it on the individual, and trying to meet them where they're at.
Yeah, I think I mean I couldn't really tell you if teams are having a run of injuries, then it could be for lots of reasons, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't know what it could be or what it would be, but it's likely a combination of load, um, chasing numbers, um, pro, training sessions on the field that might have a little bit too much contact, um, poor warm ups. Could be a number of things, right? And it could be all of the above for different people. So I think injury rates are something that, in our world, it's, in professional sport, it's the soft tissue injuries are the things we should be able to prevent. And yeah, you're always going to get one or two, but if you're having a run of them or a cluster of them, then something's not right. And so it's trying to understand what that something is. And I dare say, in different environments, it's different things. It could be inexperienced coaches. It could be an S&C coach that's pushing too hard. It could be really crap recovery systems and processes in place for the team, which is reflective of their culture. It could be so many things, right? So I think when there's clusters or a run of soft tissue injuries, then someone in the group needs to be looking at the why and figuring out how to fix it.
Yeah, definitely. And that kind of, like I say, the consistent theme that we've touched on is that, learning from it and trying to, educate in terms of how can we be better, and gaining that experience, for the individuals and finding out, why, what's happening. Quite a lot of topics, consistent themes in there, and a couple of tangents thrown in, Nick. But the last question that I like to ask from everything that we've chatted about there is, what would be your take-home points or words of wisdom?
Okay. Well, so basically a summary, mate. Is that what you're after?
We can call it
That's,
that. I just thought words of
that's
wisdom sounded a little bit.
no, that's your job, mate. That's your podcast. No, mate. I suppose that the general theme that I think I've talked about today is understand the individual and understand the critical needs of that athlete to perform well out on the field. And I think building a relationship of trust and awareness for you and the athlete, it goes both ways, is really important, and will help put together a program that they can execute, be fully motivated to execute, and know that it's going to help them out on the park. So yeah, learn about your athletes, understand who they are as people, and work with them to try and be better.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's some, a really good summary, a really good summary there, and some, good take-home points, because I think sometimes those can be lost, like what we've said, chasing numbers, or not focusing on what the priorities are. Thanks a lot, Nick, for taking the time to jump on today. If anyone has any questions about the topics that we've chatted today, or wanted to get in touch with you, where could people get in touch with you, or ask you questions about what we've spoken about today?
Probably the easiest is on Instagram, Nic Gill Health and Performance. Probably the easiest way to track me down. I think I'm on LinkedIn as well, but I don't look at that too much. So yeah, Instagram's probably easiest.
No worries at all. Thanks again, Nick, for taking the time to jump on. Really enjoyed chatting with you today. Thanks a lot to everyone listening, and I will see you all next week.